I'm very pleased to introduce our next speaker, Elizabeth Linos. She is the Vice President and Head of Research and Evaluation for the Behavioral Insights team. And I think you will want to pay particular attention because the side benefit, I believe, of listening to her presentation is it may help you to change the behavior of people even in your personal life as you think about the communications techniques that are available, whether you're communicating one-on-one or communicating on a mass scale. Elizabeth works here in North America. I'm particularly looking forward to certain aspects of her talk. She's going to be sharing behavioral insights. She's worked on a series of projects both in the UK and in the US. Her research centers on how to improve the delivery, in particular of government services, with a specific focus on recruiting, retaining, and motivating public servants. So some of those audience members who work in areas like the criminal justice system, et cetera, you may see very natural extensions of some of this work more quickly even than the commercial sector. Elizabeth has also worked as a policy advisor to the Greek Prime Minister, George Papandreou, during the Greek financial crisis. There she focused on public sector reform and government innovation. She's worked in research, design, and implementation with the Poverty Action Lab, JPAL, in Bangladesh, France, and Morocco. So she has a very interesting resume and a very interesting presentation. Welcome.
Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. I'm Elizabeth. As Irene mentioned, I work for the Behavioral Insights team in North America. So who are we? The Behavioral Insights team started in government in 2010 in the UK. So we were part of the Prime Minister's office, and we were the first governmental institution dedicated to using behavioral science, which is really at the center of economics and psychology, to try to improve programs, improve policies, and generally make the world a better place. So we were a small team then. We spun out of government a few years ago, and now we have about 70 employees across the world, and offices in London, Sydney, and most recently, New York City. But really, the mission has stayed the same. The purpose of the organization is to use what we know about how people actually behave, rather than how we think they should behave, to improve programs and to improve policies. So before we get started with some examples, I wanted to play a game with you, and you'll quickly realize that my definition of a game is different than your definition of a game. So you all have a bunch of pieces of paper and pens in front of you. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you a bunch of words. I want you to just look at the list on your screens, don't use your pens, and try to remember as many words as possible. After 30 seconds, I'm going to ask you to write down what you remember. Really simple. Okay? Is everyone ready? No writing, no cheating. Oops. What, you can't do that? Okay. Everyone take a moment to write down what you remember. Now we're going to do this with a show of hands. No cheating. If the word is on the page, raise your hand. How many of you remembered snore? Okay, I would say about 30% of the room. Wake? Almost everybody. Blanket? Great job, almost everyone, about 80%. Nap? Oh, you guys are so good at this. Sleep? Yeah, about 70%. So in most audiences, about 40 to 55% of people remembered the word sleep. Turns out the word sleep wasn't on the list. So you guys were extra motivated. That's good. And this is great for just showing a really simple concept, the concept of false recall. Now, I know we have a lot of members from the criminal justice field in this audience. So while this is really funny, when it comes to public policy, really simple human bias can seep into how we think about juries, how we think about witnesses, how we think about doctors prescribing medication. False recall is actually a very common phenomenon. And as you can see, we all have the same human biases. Okay, one more. Imagine you're a trader. I know a lot of you are. So let's see if this works. And you have to choose where you're going to invest your funds. And you have three options: the green line, the red line, and the blue line. By a show of hands, who is going to invest their money with the green line? Maybe 5, 10%? How many of you are going to invest with the red line? Okay, I would say almost everybody. And how about the blue line? A few risk-averse people in the audience? Okay. Okay. Now imagine you're an auditor. Which funds look suspicious? It's the same graph. All you have to think about is your perspective, the framing of the question, and people's responses change. And this is really what a lot of behavioral science is about, finding those really simple biases and using them to frame questions differently, to think about how you can get people to act in a beneficial way that's good for them and good for society. And really, taking for granted that we're not going to convince everyone that we are economic rational actors, and we should stop designing policy that way. Okay, so what does BIT do? We get called by governments around the world to try to answer some really big questions. So we get questions like, can you help us reduce unemployment, or improve government engagement, or improve diversity in the police, or stop antimicrobial resistance, or delinquent payments, or crime rates, or education outcomes? The common factor here is that these are really, really complex problems, really large social challenges. And what we try to do with our work is say, how can we take those really large social challenges with decades and decades of institutional complexities to them, and really try to think about where we can make a difference? What that means is we're trying to take these big problems and break them down into individual behaviors, and then break down those behaviors into individual micro behaviors where we think we can make a difference. So if you take an example like unemployment, for example, fixing unemployment is not going to be something that we can do overnight. But what we can do is think about what are the specific behaviors that are involved in getting someone to find a job. Really, really drill down to the micro behavior. How can we get someone to show up to a job interview? How can we get someone to fix their CV? How can we get someone to feel confident when they walk into that job interviews? If we can tweak all those individual micro behaviors in a rigorous way, we think we can have larger social impact than waiting for large-scale, complex organizational change. And then when we've come up with our idea about how we're going to tweak a program, we test it, and this is a really important part of what we do. Now, a lot of you have heard of randomized control trials, but if you haven't, this is the reminder course. A randomized control trial is just a way of testing that our ideas work, and it comes straight out of the medical literature. This is how new drugs, for example, are tested before they go onto the market. We use the same principle for social science. You have a population of people that you're targeting, so let's say everybody who's unemployed, and you break them up into two groups. And you break them up into two groups randomly, and that's really important, because statistically, these two groups will have the same number of men, same number of women, same number of rich people, same number of poor people, but even on unobservables, same number of motivated people, same number of people who had eggs for breakfast. Whatever characteristic you care about or think might matter, you're going to have the same number of people in both groups with those characteristics. So statistically, they're identical. So then if you give your program to half of that group, the only difference between business as usual and your new idea is your new idea. If you measure anything at the end and you see a difference in people's behavior, you can make a credible causal claim that your program made the difference. So all the examples that I'm going to show you today were tested using randomized control trials. Okay, so let's get started with the actual ideas. When we structure our work in behavioral science, we try to make it as simple as possible. And we use this framework called EAST. The framework is really simple. It just says, if you want someone to do something, make it easy for them. Make it attractive, make it social, and make it timely. So I'll give you a few examples of the work we've done in each of these spaces. First, easy. We often get asked to work on tax repayment, and you'll soon find out why. And this is a project that we did in the UK, where they were working with people who hadn't paid their taxes. And what they wanted to do was send people a letter that said, you haven't paid your taxes, you're delinquent, please make sure to go to the website and turn in your tax return. What we did is we said, okay, how can we make this process as simple as possible for people? So what we did is we said, okay, how can we make the process of that letter as simple as possible? And I want you to take a moment to think about what a small difference I'm actually suggesting is. The letter that they were going to send out sends people to the UK Tax Authority website. What we said is, you know what, 2 or 3 extra clicks to get me to the right form is way too complicated. Why don't we just send people directly to the form they have to turn in? So the only difference between these 2 letters is that one sends you to the website and one sends you to the form that you need to fill out. And these are the differences. Sending people to the website got about 20%, 19% of people to turn in their tax returns. Just switching the link increases the number of people who turn in a tax return, pay their taxes to the government, by 4 percentage points. This is thousands and thousands of extra pounds by just one small change. Another example, we work a lot in public health, and in the UK, about 1 in 15 prescriptions has an error, which in some ways can be fatal and incredibly risky and can add cost to the National Health Service. So what we did is we said, how can we make the process as simple as possible for prescribers, for physicians, to not make any errors? The top form, I don't know if you can see, is the old chart. It's basically a blue piece of paper, and at the top it has a bunch of instructions. My favorite is the top, which says, please write legibly. All of you who know or have ever seen something written by a doctor knows why that's funny. And it has a whole bunch of instructions of all the things they need to fill in. And we said, okay, let's just redesign this form so that it can be as simple as possible for the prescriber to not make any errors. So we did things that any one of us can think of. We put little boxes to encourage people to write legibly. Rather than having to write micrograms or milligrams, we asked them to circle the right dosage. So really, really small changes that were supposed to simplify the process. And here are the results. On things like correct dosage entries, we had a 5% error rate. Just by changing the process from writing out the dosage to circling it, we got rid of all those errors. And on things like adding a prescriber's contact number, which is incredibly important if there are conversations about what the right prescription is, we increased that from 30% to 80%, just by adding in a little box. And this can really translate into public health gains, just by simplifying the process for the perspective of the user in one case, but also the civil servant that has to do this process. Okay, next, making things attractive. This is a project that we did in New Orleans. We were working with a population of people who were entitled to a free health checkup because of a Medicaid voucher program. And this is a population that hadn't gone to the doctor in over 2 years. So a population that has access to a free service, just hasn't used it yet. And we said, how can we make it as easy and attractive as possible for people to take up this service? And what we did is we sent text messages. So we worked with the health department, and we sent people one of 3 potential text messages. The first said, hi, it's Chris from the health department. Text yes to be contacted to set up a free doctor's appointment. Nice and simple, just the information you need. Then we said, how can we spruce this up with behavioral science? We added in a sentence that said, you have been selected to receive a free healthcare appointment, which is true. And the third is one that, for those of you who work in government, will have seen many times. We thought, why don't we pull the pro-social lever? People, when you ask them in surveys and in questionnaires, why they go to the doctor, they say, for my family, for my kids. So we said, okay, let's say, take care of yourself so you can care for the ones you love, and see if that's going to motivate people to go to the doctor. I'm tempted to ask you which one you think is most effective. Who thinks simple is most effective? Okay. Who thinks ego is most effective? Okay. Who thinks pro-social is most effective? Oh, this is great. You're split in thirds. When you ask most governments that I've worked with this question, almost all say that the pro-social message is going to be the most effective. And here are the results. So not only does the pro-social message not work, it backfires compared to a simple message. The most effective message is one that plays on people's egos. And once you've seen the results, it's obvious, right? I'm not talking about rocket science. I'm talking about human behavior, what we would respond to, what everybody responds to, and just thinking about that when we design our communications with people. This one will potentially be interesting for a very different audience in the room. We worked with an investment bank that wanted to increase the number of people who donated a day's worth of their salary to charity. And this is something that they did every year, and they had very low take-up. So we worked together to try to find ways to make the process of donating a day's worth of salary more attractive. And we used a bunch of different options. We managed in one day to get about $780,000 donated to charity. This works because it's an investment bank. It wouldn't work in other organizations. Yeah, it was just one guy. One guy was very, very generous. But this is what we did. We had a control group that received the standard kind of email from the CEO saying, please donate to charity today. We're doing a big charity drive. Then we used a celebrity who came into the investment bank and encouraged people to donate to charity. Now, granted, he was slightly, a B-list celebrity, but a lot of people use celebrities to try to encourage people to donate to charity. Then we used sweets. So you saw the packet already. This was 50 cents of sweets that we gave to people as they walked into the room and said, here are some sweets. And please donate a day's worth of your salary. The concept behind this behaviorally is one of reciprocity. And you'll all know this in your own lives. If somebody does a favor for you or does something nice for you, not only do you feel the need to repay them, you usually repay them in spades. And then we said, what else can we use? Can we personalize this, make it feel more personal? So we sent a personalized email to each employee in that group to see if that would encourage people to donate. And then we had this group that combined both the sweets at the door and a personal email in their inbox to get them to donate. So with the control group, about 5% of people were donating. In most of our organizations, that's about right for a day. Adding in a celebrity did improve things, and these are all statistically significant results. So 7% of people were donating a day's worth of salary. Giving 50 cents of sweets increased it significantly. So let's think about what a day's worth of salary is and how much money we spent on those sweets. Personalizing it improved even more. And the most effective intervention was just a personal email and one simple sense of reciprocity. If you think about the return on investment of those sweets, you can think about other contexts where this can be appropriate. But we know that reciprocity works, and we've seen it in a lot of different contexts. Okay, social. Now this one I know you can all relate to. The basic premise of social norms in behavioral science is that we are all our middle school selves, and we care about what our friends are doing, and we care if we're not doing what everybody else is doing. Now, we've used that quite a bit in the UK for tax collection purposes, and the tax trials that we've done using social norms have brought forward about $300 million in extra tax revenue for the UK government. This is also kind of when people in government started getting excited about behavioral science, because once you put a number on it, they're like, this might actually matter. The most effective or most famous of these social norm treatments was, again, changing one line in the tax letter that was going out to people who were delinquent. And the note said this: 9 out of 10 people pay their taxes on time, which is true. The idea behind this is that everybody else is doing it, why aren't you? What we wanted to test was, what is the norm that actually matters to people? Is it true that I care what everybody else in the UK is doing, or is there some sort of smaller peer group that I'm most interested in? So we were interested in testing the UK norm, which is 9 out of 10 people pay their taxes on time, and that was definitely more effective than the control. Then we tried a local norm, which was even more effective. So the majority of people in your region pay their taxes on time. Then we said, the easiest thing you can do if you don't want to pay your taxes is say, yeah, everybody else is paying their taxes, but they don't have a debt like mine. So we said, the obvious point, the majority of people with a debt like yours are paying their taxes on time. Even better. And the most effective sentence that we changed in the tax letter is one that said, the majority of people in your region with a debt like yours are paying their taxes on time. Now, these look like small percentages, but think about what the effect of this is over a country, which is now national policy. It's hundreds and hundreds of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars in extra revenue with zero additional cost. The government is sending out letters all the time. Just by being thoughtful and testing what message is most effective increases revenue dramatically. Now, because we've done this quite a bit in government, and we've run lots and lots of different tests, we can then look at a kind of a subgroup analysis and think about what motivates different portions of the population. So while it is definitely true that a message that talks about the majority of other people is most effective on average, if you break up the income distribution by quartiles, and you think about what's most effective for your average Joe versus the richest of the rich, it turns out those messages are different. So for almost everybody, a message that says, you're different than the majority is effective. For the top 1%, a message that says, you're different than the majority backfires. No surprise there. They know they're different than the majority. But interestingly, a message that talks about public services, a message that says, because you're not paying your taxes, we're not going to have resources for health and education and parks and hospitals, is actually really effective. So that poses a policy question, right? You're either interested in getting more of your population to pay their taxes, or you're just trying to increase overall government revenue. And thinking about this in a rigorous way might lead you to very, very different policy outcomes and different letters. Now, the last category that I want to talk to you about is timeliness. So timeliness just says, look, if you want someone to act, you have to target them at exactly the right time that's good for them. Not good for you, not good for your government department, not because it's budget season, not because it works on your timeline, what's good for them. So this is a trial that we did in the UK with a police force that was particularly interested in the diversity of their police. And as with many police forces across the world, the demographics of the police did not match the demographics of the community that they were trying to serve. And they saw that there was this big drop-off at one point in the assessment process. It was a situational judgment test, a standard test that is used in recruitment, where non-white applicants were doing disproportionately worse off than white applicants on the test. So we said, okay, this is the moment where we're going to intervene. We want to intervene right before people take this test to see if we can improve people's scores. And what we did is we used a lot of literature from human psychology on stereotype threat that says that really just the context in which you're giving a test to someone and reminding them that they may not be welcome in a specific environment might actually affect their results. So just telling, for example, a woman before she takes a math test that women often do poorly on math tests reduces scores, right? It's called stereotype threat. We thought, how can we reverse this, take away that stereotype threat, and create an environment that suggests you are welcome here. Not only you are welcome, you are wanted in this police force. And what we did is we took their standard letter, which literally was just the email that said, go to the next stage, click on this link, take this test. We changed the language. We talked about congratulations. We said, you've succeeded to hit this point. And we added in one sentence that said, before you take this test, I want you to think about what it would mean to you and your community if you were a police officer. And these are the results. So this is the control group that was getting the standard letter. On the left, you'll see white applicants. They were passing the test at around 60% versus 40%. So this is a huge gap in pass rates between white and non-white applicants. Changing the email that they saw right before they took the test had no effect on white people. They know they're welcome. Telling them they're welcome doesn't change anything. But for non-white applicants, it had a huge increase in the number of people who passed the test, a 50% increase in the number of people who passed the test. And we didn't change the test questions, we didn't get rid of the test, we didn't change the standard, but we had an effect on diversity. Another example on timeliness is in the space of unemployment, and I spoke about this at the beginning of my talk. So one problem in many situations is getting people to show up to interviews where they have a high likelihood of getting a job. In the UK, if you're unemployed, you go to a job center, and the job center is responsible for helping you find a job and also giving you your benefits. But because this is kind of a centralized location, a lot of mass recruitment events happen through the job center. So if a new hospital opens up, or an amusement park, or a factory, and they need kind of 700 jobs stat, they'll go to the job center and run a mass recruitment event through that. Now, the good news is, if you're an unemployed person, that your chances of getting that job are very high, because they're really looking for people right now in your community. The bad news is, this isn't mandatory, so only about 10% of people were showing up to these mass recruitment events. Now, what we did is we spruced up the text messages that were going out to everyone. So this is a typical text message that was going out. It says, 8 new picker-packer jobs are available. Come to this job center on this date, ask for Sarah. First thing we added was the name of the person it was going to. Now, this seems obvious, but personalizing any communication increases the chance that people are going to pay attention in a timely way. So we added in the name of the person. Hi, Elspeth, same message. Then we added in the name of their job coach, the person who's responsible for helping them find a job, creating this personalized relationship between the job seeker and the job coach. Last, we added in a sentence that said, I've booked you a place, good luck. Now, this goes back to the concept of reciprocity. The job coach, the government employee, did something nice for you. They didn't have to, but they did something nice for you, and I'm asking you to show up. And these are the results. As I mentioned, in the control group, only about 10% of people were showing up. Just adding the name of the recipient increases that rate by 50%. Adding in the name of the sender increases it even more. And again, the most effective intervention more than doubles the number of people who show up to an interview, just by changing the text message. Zero cost change. They were sending text messages out anyway. We just changed the language on that text message. Now, as you'll note, a lot of these examples are nudges. They're all small tweaks. But before I leave you with that, I just wanted to give you one example where we are asked to come in and just change the process, change the organization, just simplify it all. So we've done a lot of work on unemployment, and we were asked to think about the full process of the job seeker, the user experience, the civil servant experience, and just improve how people get back to work. And what we did is we spent a lot of time doing ethnographic research. It turns out when you walk into a job center, for the first 30 minutes, you're just signing forms, unclear why you're signing them, unclear why there's so many of them, but that's your first experience when you've lost your job. So we redesigned the process to make it as simple as possible. First, we worked with the legal teams to say, okay, which one of these forms is actually legally necessary, and how can we take out all that stuff to simplify it down to just the forms and just the signatures that are required per law. And that went from 9 forms to 3. Then we said, how can we use the fact that people are interested in finding a job and motivated, but at that given moment, not particularly sure where to go and overwhelmed, to focus them on the right behavior? And this is called a commitment mechanism, and I know a lot of you have heard of this concept before. We got people to write down what they were going to do in the next 2 weeks to find a job. Now, the law in the UK says you have to show that you're applying to at least 3 jobs in the previous 2 weeks. So in the standard model, what was happening is you'd walk into a job center every 2 weeks, and your job coach would say, have you applied for 3 jobs in the past 2 weeks? You would say yes, and you would be on your way. What we said is, okay, no one's going to find a job if you're just applying for 3 jobs every 2 weeks, and why are we anchoring people to this low number? So instead, within the law, said, rather than talking about the previous 2 weeks, let's talk about the next 2 weeks. What are you going to do in the next 2 weeks to find a job? And it turns out people write down crazy things. I'm going to apply to 200 jobs. I'm going to send my CV to 50 new employers. And they write it down in their own handwriting. And honestly, we didn't really care if they met that goal. The point is, if you say 200 and you apply to 10, that's still a lot more than 3. And the last thing we did is we added in a quiz of your strengths that we gave to people when they started. Because we know how important morale is when you're trying to find a job. And we know how important it is to know what your strengths are when you're walking into an interview. So in the control group, about 51% of people were off benefit, so back into work in the 13-week period, which is the target period for the government. Changing this process, simplifying it, humanizing it, increased the number of people back into work. Not the number of people who are aware of opportunities, not the number of people who feel ready to find a job, people with actually having a job. And this is really important because when we measure things in terms of behavior, it becomes more relevant to government. This started off as a pilot project in one job center. Then we did a regional trial in one region of the UK, and now those commitment booklets are national policy. Not because this is some sort of genius, complicated new fact, because we tested it, and we can show the impact numbers in a way that matters to government, in the number of people who actually find a job. And this is thousands and thousands of more people getting off benefits faster. So I'll stop there, and I look forward to your questions. I'm so glad I'm not the only one with technical difficulties.
Hello?
Yeah.
Hi, Elizabeth. Claude Singer from Siegelvision. My reaction to your wonderful talk can be summarized in one word, and that's terror. It's frightening to think for two reasons. One, that we human beings can be so manipulated by you and your team by just tweaking the language here and there, as we are rats in this labyrinth that you are manipulating. But secondly, I think in a more positive vein, that we as communicators are missing opportunities by choosing this word or that, or by going through this typical communicative process instead of another that might be improved. So my question is simply, how can you alleviate my terror on both fronts?
Sure.
Thank you.
I'll start with the easy one. I can't alleviate your terror on the second one. You are losing money and thinking because people aren't using behavioral science to improve their processes. But I think the real question is your first one, which is this all just manipulation? It's an important question. And I have two potential responses to it. First, if I came up here and I said, I work for Coca-Cola, and guess what? We test what message is going to get you to buy more Coke, you wouldn't be surprised. Nothing from what I'm saying hasn't been used in the private sector for marketing purposes in the past 50 years, I would say. The tools are improving, but the idea that we're going to target our message to get you to do something isn't a new one. Potentially what is new and innovative is that the government is now using it for social good. So my sense is we should be less terrified if everybody knows how to use these tools and not just top private sector companies that are trying to sell you a soda. So that's the first response. The second is the government has been in the business of telling you what to do for a while, and I know that might be terrifying, but if you haven't paid your taxes, they're going to try and convince you to pay your taxes. If you haven't gone to the doctor, or if you don't recycle, or if you aren't getting a job, it is the role of the government to encourage you to do that behavior, usually because it's good for you. And if you don't agree, that's fine. That's why the democratic process is there. It turns out when you survey people, they're actually quite comfortable with these concepts. If you say, should the government be in the business of helping people get a job, most people say yes. The question is, should we be using the most sophisticated tools and the best understanding of human behavior to do that? Or should we have a lower standard for the government because it's the government? So that's my argument is we absolutely require this in other fields. We should require the same level of accountability for government. And the same applies to testing in the labyrinth, right? You would never be comfortable with the FDA saying, meh, the company put out a new drug, they ran a focus group, they said it works, we're good. We require testing because we require that level of rigor and scientific evidence. I don't see why we shouldn't be using that in social science as well. I think there's
Maybe it's a simple question, but when you go into a government agency, how do you bring in your measurements, and do they adjust to that? And how do you interface with them in terms of gathering this data?
That's a really good question. So because we came from government, and a lot of us were civil servants, I worked in government, I know the horror of a consultant coming in and saying, we're going to sell you a new software package and a new data system. We don't do that. So what we try to do for all of these is use administrative data that's already been collected. Now, it's true that because of technology, sometimes you can collect new data really easily. So when you're sending text messages, it's really easy to collect responses. If you're getting people to click onto a website, we can follow that user experience quite easily without any additional cost. But in the cases where there is a data collection cost, what we're trying to do is use administrative data that's already been collected. Not only does that mean we can do low-cost evaluations quickly and iteratively, it also means that we're targeting metrics that the government cares about. So, we could make up a metric for, job seekers' readiness to go into the workforce. But really, the department cares about getting people back into work and off benefits. And they're collecting that information. Same with the police. The police has tons of potential, administrative data sources for things like what a police officer is doing, the recruitment process, any interaction with a citizen. All of those are already collected. The question is, how can we leverage that to make more informed decisions?
I have one question. I mentioned it just before. I think what you've been talking about has been sort of summarized in the word nudge. What is your sense of how effective the nudge factor has been used in the Obama administration?
That's a really good question. So yes, nudge, so we used to be called by the press the nudge unit. We fought it for a while. We said, we're not the nudge unit, this is behavioral science. Turns out we're definitely the nudge unit. So the Obama administration has used it wonderfully for campaigning. They're not the only ones who have used it. Everyone has. But I think the Obama administration was the first to show how you can use data science and quick iterative testing to improve behavior. So we know a lot about how to get someone to show up to a voting booth, partly because of this iterative process that was used in campaigning. Now, a lot of other campaigns have used it as well. I just think that the Obama administration made it famous as an approach during those initial kind of rounds. And if you're still getting emails from a certain campaign, apparently it works. Apparently pestering people on and on to donate actually works. So yeah, they have used it. I think that's totally fine because it's not that different than anybody else pestering you with an email to get them to buy a product. The good news is that we're reaching a level of sophistication in politics and in government that we haven't had before. And I think that's good news.